Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. We're going to talk about how to make your sex better in the new year. Now, this is going to sound so simple, you're going to wonder, wow, why didn't I think of it? What's really original about this? I'm going to say, talk to your partner about sex. Now, why is that a novel idea? Here's why. Many of us have the sexual relationship that we started out in the beginning. Meaning it's more or less an extension of what we've done over and over and over. So if you're bored with your sex, think about it in terms of what are you doing that's actually different? The way you communicate to your partner, if it's similar to what it was, let's say your relationship is a couple years old, 10 years old, however long that you've been with this particular partner, are you really doing things that are different than when you first started? Now, many people talk about being bored with their sexual relationship with their partner, and it's probably technique. It's probably communication styles. There can be some combinations of those things, but when you think about how people operate in their day-to-day, unless you actually put effort into learning something different, we don't tend to do different. Meaning if you want your sex to be a little more spicy, a little more interesting, you're going to have to put effort into it. That is, you might have to do some studying, research. And to me, research isn't just looking at a film of other people being intimately involved. It's more hands-on than that. I mean, you have to spend time with your partner and experiment with things. Now, you can share watching videos or something with your partner. And I'm not going to discourage your intimate time or how you spend those moments with your partner, because the idea is that both of you are going to get something beneficial from it. But we oftentimes want to be entertained and taught in this way that really isn't about hands-on for ourselves. It's almost as if it's this osmosis thing. No, you're going to have to put effort into being with your partner, into communicating, into touch, into learning how to do it soft, and learning how to do it with a feather, or these other things that are more hands-on. It's amazing how much we want sex and how we perceive it's supposed to go about. We think of people performing things on us. You really got to get it and put the effort into it. So, back to the initial thing that I was talking about, and it's where people come together in the very beginning of their relationship. Now, that sex may be new to those two partners because they're new to each other. But people get into these routines. And some things are pretty ritual. We have some ideas of what gets us aroused. And how much expanding on those original ideas have you done with your partner? Consider that for a moment. How much actual growth has there been beyond the initial attraction, sexual experience kind of thing? Has it really changed much? And if it hasn't, here is an opportunity for you to engage in some new thoughts, in some new patterns. Something that's going to be spicy, interesting for you. And the bottom line, you're going to have to communicate something. Now, talking about sex isn't easy. Imagine this. If you had to speak about sex in front of a group of people, would you really be comfortable doing that? Most people don't even make eye contact in a situation like this when they're really uncomfortable. I mean, you notice. If you're the speaker, you're used to being looked at, you talk, you communicate. But if you're one of those audience members, you guys all have your backs to each other, so you really don't get to see somebody else's face. You just see the person raise their hand, and that's it. But are you comfortable talking about your own feelings, talking about your own desires, what arouses you? Again, beyond that initial conversation, because when you haven't had sex with your partner and you're trying to develop that rapport, well, you're going to have to show some sort of interest to let your partner or let the other person know that it's okay to be in conversation about this. And then it builds, and you have that anticipation, that arousal that keeps happening, and then you become engaged with being intimate, and you reach that step. And you tend to repeat this because for that moment, you have a roadmap to intimacy with that partner. Now, that roadmap is just a beginning. Think of all the roads that are on a map, all the little trails and things that get highlighted. Now, this is your assignment. You don't just have that one path. If you keep going down that one path, it's going to get used quite a bit. And if you can imagine that becoming a tired, worn out, old path, and you get bored with it because you've been down that trail many, many times. So you need to do something different. But again, going back to the mindset about how this all gets started, being comfortable with making change, and not just for change's sake, but for the idea that we want to keep it interesting for ourselves. We can already take that one idea that we started out with and put that in our repertoire, so to speak. So you want to branch out, but you got to get comfortable with talking about it with your partner and saying, hey, let's try something new, and being open to it. Or at least being open to the conversation. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm talking about is being open to having the conversation. See, I don't want sex to feel like for you that it is just a job. That, for a lot of people, I think takes their joy out of it. If it feels like it's just a duty. If you're feeling that way about your sex, then I would encourage you to be in conversation about why that's the case for you. I would hope that you're enjoying your sexual experience. And if there's something that's going on for you and it's not happening, there are lots of professionals out there who deal with the side effects, let's say, of medication or maybe depression, or if there's been a traumatic event that's happened in your life that makes sex not something that's interesting for you. Maybe you can talk about that so you can remove the barriers so that you can experience intimacy again. And, not just sexual intimacy, even just experiencing the caress, the touch of someone who means something special to you, and being able to appreciate that and enjoy that. See, that's well short of the sexual intercourse experience, but it is something that could be had by you, and for you to feel like you want to engage with somebody who's very important, very special to you, and you can begin to regain that trust. What I'm talking about here is sex in the new year and how you can get to have better communication with your partner and learn how to be open to discussing new ideas, new thoughts. Because remember, when this thing first started out, we were trying to establish something. And getting into that routine after a period of time, sometimes we're afraid to branch out, thinking, oh, well, if I, get too far out, then, my partner's going to think I'm weird or something negative about me. You got to take a risk. At least be open to the conversation yourself, encourage your partner, and say, hey, look, I'd like to try something new. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back, and we'll talk about how to get into that conversation.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello there. Welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm talking about sex in the new year. Now, getting into that conversation, this is something that you're going to want to commit to, because if this is brand new for you, having a conversation with your partner about sex and maybe changing things up, this might really just come out of the blue. And for your partner, you need to be able to reassure them that, look, this isn't because something is wrong with our sex. You just want to try something different. You just want to make some changes because you can, because you're healthy enough to do so. It's really easy to get stuck in a rut with things because we're afraid to say something, thinking that if we say something, our partner is going to reject us. Sometimes it's just one of you having the courage to say something. The other one says, oh, yeah, great. But you don't know that until you have the conversation. And I encourage people to think outside of the box just for their own sake. And given that when you do this from time to time, boy, does it give you an opportunity to not only work in this area of the relationship, but in other areas as well. You can use it as inspiration. But wow, if you think that this is going to give you an opportunity for some more interesting, mind-blowing sex for you, I think you would want to engage. You would want to have your partner be there with you. Like I said, one or the other may be waiting for their partner to say something because they're afraid. And that happens. You may not even know it, but after you've been able to get over that hurdle, then you can talk about, wow, what's been keeping us from having this conversation before? Sometimes it's the idea that if we talk about it, you might get really, okay, well, what was the inspiration for that? Okay, well, you don't know. I just was being creative, was trying to think outside of the box. That's my favorite one. I don't necessarily have to have any particular reason. I didn't necessarily see somebody do it. I didn't hear about it. Or maybe you read about it in a magazine. You were just kind of spending time. Whatever the reason is, share that with your partner. They may have had an idea. It may spark them to recall something that they might want to do. And just know that this is the case. You are both on the same side. You're both on the same team. And by embracing that, then you really realize that you are there for each other. And I think you have to validate this idea that you are there for each other, because it can become one of these things like, wow, one of the others seems like they're getting way out there on the fringes. And, where are they coming up with these ideas? Well, it's like a lot of things. It's free thinking. Just let your mind roam. Just let your mind wander. I mean, how many of you have had dreams and just had just these really, really different ideas that just pop into your head? I mean, they wouldn't necessarily happen in real life, but you wonder how some of those things happen. See, that's just the mind free thinking. And just leave it up to that. There doesn't have to be any particularly negative reason that this happens. It just does. And I say go with it. Experiment with that. And, bless your partner with the ideas that you have, and one or both of you can come up with something together. And this is the beautiful thing about when you have your partner. You guys can discuss it. You can negotiate it. You can figure out what you want to do. You can plan it. And this is something to be able to do in the new year. Quite often, one partner or the other seems to have the burden of initiating, and then the other person has the responsibility of responding. And if that's the case in your relationship, if that's something that you've worked out, let's say you have, and this is just an illustration, a dominant and submissive kind of thing in the relationship, then that's something you've worked out. Those are roles that you play, and it's agreed upon. But if you don't have something that's really dialed in like that, then here's an opportunity to put something into play and do it for the sake of your relationship so that you can enjoy it, you can enjoy each other, and appreciate the intimacy that you have. One thing I know is that physical intimacy is something that a lot of people are not able to experience, and for lots of reasons. Medical reasons, some people emotionally they've checked out, and I addressed that earlier about that particular case. They've checked out. They may feel as though because they're a certain age that it's just not something that we do anymore. And let me tell you, let me put that age thing to rest. I know of people who are in their 70s and 80s who are still experiencing a really healthy sexual life. Things do change with age, but that does not mean that there is no sex at all. And I'm happy to report that as you age, you can enjoy yourself with your partner. Now, one of the age-related things that happens is you may have fewer partners to choose from. So let's say if you were a woman, because women tend to outlive men, you may have had a long life in a relationship and your partner has passed away, and so now you're a single woman. Well, there is self-love. And I have also known of women who, as they've gotten older, because there are no available men, they have decided that, having a woman partner is something that works for them. This is the reality of life. They love intimacy. They want to share it with someone who they feel close to or they feel special to. And that's an option for them. Now, when you think about men as they get older, as they age, there are a lot of age-related things that happen to men. Some, maybe the erection isn't as firm as it was at one time, or it takes longer, or you can't have sex as many times as you did when you were a little more youthful. And again, that's a relative term. But for men, it's usually men are bigger fish in a smaller pond because there's fewer men as they get older. Now, again, if you're taking care of yourself, you can live a little longer and you can still experience a good sexual health later on in your years. And if you're having challenges with that, there are doctors. They can prescribe things for you. And maybe it might even be an indication that there might be a health something that you need to have some information on. So if you're having a challenge being physically active, sexually active, that is, then it's an opportunity to really look at your lifestyle. Is it your diet? Do you need to exercise? And those are recipes for a longer, healthier quality of life. You see, good diet and some exercise. You can work on that. So to recap some of this, number one, I want you to be open to your partner's ideas. Get out the pencil and paper or pen and paper or a notepad or cell phone or a tablet, whatever you like to jot down your ideas on, and start keeping track of this stuff. Check the ideas off as you do them, and flush the ideas out. You might even do it this way. You go into your own, you write down everything that you have, your partner writes down, and we make a date to get together. So let's say it's tomorrow evening. We've written down our ideas, and we want to have a conversation about what we would like to do. Just like in terms of the conversation, just like you were having a meeting, just like you were planning. Okay, we're gonna have a trip. Now, okay, you got to have fun with this. So it's not so much work, but it's about the idea of you enjoying your partner and having a conversation about something that a lot of people tend to avoid, because some people, they only talk about sex or want to talk about it when they're in the bedroom, meaning they don't talk about it any place else. Of course, if they're upset, they'll talk about it anytime they feel like it because they're frustrated. But when they want to talk about it, they'll just only talk about it in the bedroom because they got to shut the door. They don't want anybody to hear their conversation. Yeah, okay, I get the idea. But be open to exploring other possibilities. You see, being in that room and only talking about it there, it's almost a metaphor for that imprisoning yourself in your mind, and you don't get outside that box and be creative. And you've got to do that when it comes to sex, or else it'll become stale and boring for not only you, but your partner. And think about your partner. I'm going to take a break right here, and I'll come back right after this. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, for Sex in the New Year. Okay, so we've got a template for getting out of our rut. Number one, we've established the fact that we want to have a new start. We want to have a fresh beginning. We understand how we got into our rut, probably because we've got old ideas and no one's decided to go the step further because we were afraid of what that might seem like. So, okay, we're going to toss that aside. And we're going to be open. We're going to think outside of the box. We're not just going to talk about sex only in the bedroom. We're going to talk about it whenever we feel like talking about it. We're going to write it down on pieces of paper or your notepad or tablet or whatever you like to put down your ideas. And you and your partner are going to do that. You can do it together or you can do it separately. Whatever gets your creative juices going. And you're going to come back together. You're going to discuss this, you're going to pick some ideas, and you're going to put a timetable on it so that you can do some of these things. So this stuff doesn't just stay on the page, but think about how it was when you first got together. Remember when it was brand new, you would talk about things, you'd kind of think about, wow, this is going to be interesting, and you had the conversations because you wanted to be intimate. That roadmap, that intimacy, it became the routine. It's like you go the same way to the grocery store, the same way to work. Now, if there's more than one way to get there, and when it comes to love and intimacy, there are dozens and dozens of ways. We have lots of ideas in our head. If you can dream, then you can have lots of ideas. So now that we've written things down, we've also come to understand something else, that we've come to depend on our partner to be a listener of our heart and what we're thinking, and we have to learn to do the same. Because here's something that will throw this thing in the trash if you do it. You don't make fun of your partner's ideas. I mean, there's one thing to have fun with each other and to enjoy each other and to banter back and forth, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to kill the creativity by making your partner feel dumb or feel unappreciated. That's the thing that really starts to make a relationship go stale. And if there's anything that kills a relationship is when your partner feels like they are unappreciated. And sex is one of those things that really gets at us in a very vulnerable place. And partners don't tend to want to feel very sexual when they don't feel safe. And vulnerability, depending upon where you are with that, the more vulnerable you feel, the less safe you feel. So there's a correlation there. And that's why when you're trying to listen to your partner's ideas, the thing that you want to do is you want to validate them. And if it's something that seems like it's a little off, well, maybe it just needs a little fine tuning. But you don't just throw the ideas away. You can find a lot of things that work for the both of you, and I encourage you to do so for the sake of your lovemaking and your relationship. What I don't want to see your relationship turn into is something that's more of a couch potato type, more like you're observers, like people who are watching other people make love on the TV. See, that's not you. You have to be engaged. You have to do something. And you don't have to do it as fast as Olympic runners. And here's the thing about porn. If that's something that you are into, I'm not judging. I'm just giving you an idea. You have to understand that pornography, being what it is, those are professionals, those are actors, and they make it look good. That whole scene is designed to get you aroused, but that's for show. And it may do exactly that. It may get you aroused to be with your partner, and you don't have to perform the things that you see on the screen. I mean, you can come up with your own variation of it. But that, again, allow that to be your creativity that comes into place, and it's something that you and your partner get to do. Remember, I'm not judging, but I'm just trying to get you to understand the practicality of where certain things fit into your life and how you can do them. And if you're just being an observer, you're not doing. You're sitting in the stands. So I like to use this analogy. You're either in the stands or you're on the court. And when you're on the court, you're in the game. So for that, you want to be with your partner and the two of you be engaged in some fairly interesting, different, new kinds of lovemaking. Remember, you can always go back to some of the old stuff, but the more ideas that you have, then the more variation you have. You don't have to do it in the same place all the time. You don't have to do it the same time of night. You can do it in the daytime or whenever you feel inspired to do so. And give yourself permission to wear costumes and to do role playing. I think it's fun when people can be lighthearted and enjoy themselves and enjoy each other having a good time. Now, just as a technique here, and I want to point this out so that if you ever want to talk to your partner about lovemaking, there are a couple of do's and don'ts. One of the don'ts, that is when you have a complaint, is you don't want to have a gripe session while you are doing the lovemaking. Here's why. Remember that thing I said about vulnerability? Well, when people are vulnerable and then you start to criticize, it makes people shut down. It makes them close off. Man or woman, it doesn't matter which one it is. They tend to do this, and it may happen right before your eyes. And other people are very good at not showing that they've been hurt because they just try to get through the moment. But it's very long lasting. So when you want to have conversations about lovemaking and that it's, say, maybe it's not going very well, you don't do it in the bedroom. Now, if your lovemaking is going great and you have happy things to talk about, yeah, you can bring those up in the bedroom because that's not going to distort or kill anybody's spirit. So think about it. That's one of the cardinal do's and don'ts when it comes to having discussions about lovemaking. The wins, if it's good stuff, you can talk about it anytime. If you've got some things that you have some concerns about, you want to talk about it outside of the bedroom because, again, the vulnerability, and people can shut down, and it can be really hard to bring them back because people's feelings can get very, very hurt at those times. Now, that notwithstanding, if there was something that's happening during your lovemaking session, then you got to bring it up. You got to talk to your partner and say, hey, this hurts, or this isn't working right here now. I mean, that's different. But when you have other ideas, as I've communicated clearly, if you got things that you're concerned about in the lovemaking, before you get engaged, you don't want to do it in the bedroom. But if you're in the act of lovemaking and something's not going right, then definitely you call a timeout. Say, hey, timeout. We gotta regroup here. That's okay. So remember, we do this because we care about each other, because we value each other. It's something that we always want to feel about our partner, that we trust, we have a commitment from them, we enjoy who they are, and they're trying the best to be the best person that they can be, and vice versa. And by doing that, then we can take on new challenges together. And I encourage you to be the best person you can be. And you'd be amazed at what happens when you encourage your partner to be less inhibited. I'm John Johnson, and this is the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, talking about sex in the new year. I hope yours is spectacular.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.